What's up, friends and listeners? You're about to hear a new episode of Disrupting with Ashley Holt. That would make me Ashley Holt. Thank you for stopping by. Disrupting is about people who are quite literally allergic to the status quo in our world. They have to make a shift or a change when they see something that needs changing. So those are the conversations I'm having with my favorite social media follows, experts, maybe a celebrity or two could pop up. We're going to manifest that together. And just some of my friends that I know we're doing amazing work for the world around us. I'm so excited for you to hear these conversations. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your favorite platform so you get notifications about new episodes, and leave comments for me. I love your feedback. Let me know what questions you want to ask, who you want me to reach out to for an interview so that we can get started on disrupting the things in this world that we need to change together. All right. Rachel Parrish, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to refer to my notes for your introduction if you don't mind, because I want to make sure we get all of the stats correct. So, Rachel, you are a marketing exec. You specialize in branding and public relations. You are a senior director at the moment. So, I want to make sure there's a very high emphasis on the executive part of what you do. Just a few of the past brands are Chicago Red Stars, NBA, State Farm, NBC Sports Chicago. I also personally love your social media. You talk about pop culture, branding, and PR, about things that are going on that are trending, which we're going to get into later because I need your opinion on some things that are going on. So that is what I'm excited about. But Rachel, I'm asking everybody this question because everyone on here is a disruptor in their space. What made you want to shake the table?
I will say my favorite saying that I tell people all the time is I am perpetually unimpressed. And I think it's just because we've gotten into a place in society, in the media, the things that we consume, where we're not holding people accountable and we're also not pushing forward the status quo. So for me, I have wonderful mentors. I have people that I've looked up to, and every single one of them decided to disrupt the industry that they were in. And I think, as you've seen, I've had a lot of opportunities to work for different brands that are innovative in their own right. State Farm really making insurance sexy and fun, and being able to experience that. And so, yeah, I think that making sure that the content and the media that we're putting out there to the masses is interesting. It challenges people's thoughts and their mindsets, but it's also based in something that is principled and has integrity.
Right. And is this what you visualized yourself doing? Because I know what you majored in. We both went to Mizzou, MIZ.
Yeah.
Thank you. So like you are working within what you got a degree in, but was this the plan? Like, did you have this vision when you were doing that?
Absolutely. I think that for me, the plan was always to be a person that kept the human interest stories at the forefront.
Mm.
And I found marketing is such a great mechanism to do that. I mean, really, it's influencing human behavior, and that's by finding those touch points. And so, being a Black woman, having the experience of growing up in the environments that I grew up in, it's been really vital to me to be able to identify those stories that relate to people who might also feel on the fringe, or if they're in the masses and still want to see themselves identified in the content. And so I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do, but I think every single time I get an opportunity to do something new, I'm surprised that, I mean, that's a possibility, right? I feel like when I was younger, I dreamed so small. And the older I got, the more I'm just dreaming bigger and bigger because I'm finding out what more is possible.
Yeah. Okay. And I have to dig into this because I just talked to my therapist. So you're going to get a very soft side of me. So just apologies in advance.
I
But you
love that.
said that you would dream so small. What do you think
Mhm.
that was? And how did you break through that? Like you had to have realized that at some moment and then had to make a conscious decision to want to change it.
Most definitely. I too am in therapy, and I say anybody who is committed to personal growth, you should challenge yourself by looking at the innermost parts of you that you love, but also those that might have been, under a shadow,
Mm-hmm.
shadow work, but
Mm-hmm.
um, self-limiting beliefs. And I think when I was younger, I was able to dream what I could see, and what I could see was so limited at the
Yeah.
time. And those created some self-limiting doubts and self-limiting beliefs as a result, because I wasn't able to see people doing it. And
Right.
so as I've grown and as I've really been a disruptor in the space and kind of forced my foot through the door in a lot of different ways, I've also wanted to make sure I am transparent with others and seeing what it looks like to be in these different spaces and what it means to um, not limit yourself to the small dream that you might have, or to be too afraid to dream big. You know, for me, my goal was always to work at the NBA. I always said, I'm going to work at the NBA. I'm going to get a job there. I'm going to do it. And then I did that
Mhm.
before the age of 30. And then I found myself at a time when I had to decide, like, what's next? Like, I accomplished the big dream. What's next? And, you know, that's when I realized I was dreaming too small and I was limiting myself based on a belief system that I had created based off of a scarcity mindset.
Right. And I want to be clear for people because I understand what you're saying. We actually grew up in very close, similar areas, like the towns border each other. You're not talking about you come from like super humble beginnings or like an unfortunate background. And I think that's important for people to know because I think a lot of people are afraid to work through things or own how they feel because they're like, well, there are people who have it worse than me. But I
Mm.
think it's on, I feel I love that you're being honest about how you felt, but I didn't want people to take that as, oh, she couldn't dream because there was nothing around her. Like, no, 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 that wasn't the
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
I know for me, it was just super white. So, like, I didn't like,
Mhm.
unless my mom took me to the other side of town, I didn't see Black women doing anything. And I feel like that's
Mhm.
similar to what you're saying.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
you hit the nail on the head. I mean, growing up, so I'm from Naperville and I'm very proud of that fact because I mean, Candace Parker is from there, you know?
Hmm.
So that fact in and of itself, growing up watching her play really did give me a lens of a worldview through sports,
Right.
which is incredibly helpful. But to your point, I found myself a lot of times being the only Black person in the room
Yeah.
or the only person that looks like or thinks like me in the room. I did TV class all through high school and I was usually, I mean, they called me the token, right? We've grown and we know from there that those things, you know, like we're not right, but it's one of those are experiences that create your reality. And
Right.
when you are told things like you're only in this room, or whether it's externally or you create those thoughts, right? You're only in this room because of X qualifier, and it's not because of your skills, or it's
Yeah.
not because of your ability to create something. You create those self-limiting beliefs, right? You start saying, well, yes, I made it this far. I should be happy that I was able to get this, right? I
Right.
feel like it's more so kind of a shift of being okay to want more versus feeling that guilt for wanting more, for not being satisfied with where you're at,
Yeah.
knowing that, you know, we did have a good upbringing. We did have a lot of things at our disposal, but we still had challenges that a lot of people do have to face. So I think that's really important to see.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm excited to get into your field and talk about your expertise, which you do a lot on social media. I do wonder, like, because we're going to talk about branding and marketing, what is something that you see people doing on the internet? Because now everyone can be a brand, build a
Mm.
brand. I'm doing it. I'm a victim. Like, I'm doing it too, right? What is something that you see people doing who want to build a brand that you are like, that is mistake number one that is not going to help you? What do you see people doing wrong?
Not understanding what a brand voice is versus
Mm.
your own personal voice. If you learn nothing else from me, it's that if you decide to have a brand presence, that brand needs to stand on its own, separate from you. I think a great example is the Real Milk and Honey with Keith Lee. I provided a video with some advice and insight, and if you guys are interested to watch that, it's up on my pages. But essentially, their response was very personal, and I could tell that that was the owner of the restaurant writing that response and creating that content in response to Keith Lee's poor review.
For people
Versus,
who don't know, can you tell them what happened?
yes. So for people who don't know, Keith Lee is an incredibly popular food
Yeah.
critic. He's got about 15 million followers based out of Las Vegas, and he started this thing called Food Tours, which is brilliant on its own.
Yes.
You can write it off as a business. So kudos to him being a smart content. Yes, you can,
Okay.
because it is for the purposes of content creation, which is for the purposes of business. So a side note, very smart. But he did a food tour in Atlanta, and Atlanta is notorious for having not great customer service standards across
Can't
the restaurant
even.
and service industry, to say the
Yes.
least. So he goes there, and there were several restaurants that ended up having challenges, but the Real Milk and Honey decided to respond to his poor review with a very contrite video where they essentially acted as if they didn't know who Keith Lee was, which in and of itself doesn't make sense because obviously you have to know who he is to be making the video in response to him.
And you put on a whole suit to do a
You
TikTok
put on
about
a
him.
whole
So
suit. You had
let's
a
be real.
script, and so it was one of those things where me as a person, a marketing practitioner, I just felt like there was such an opportunity to respond in a different manner. And I think that what brands do online is they're so reactionary to things, right? Of course, with criticism comes the comments, comes the trolls, comes the attacks and whatnot. And um, unfortunately, the Real Milk and Honey fed into the bait of all of that versus having a sensible business response, which 9 times out of 10, if you just acknowledge the thing, the infraction, and then provide mechanisms to not do that again, most consumers are going to give you the benefit of the doubt. But if you let
Yeah.
ego lead and you respond in a personal attack manner versus through a brand voice, because brands make mistake. I mean, that's why you have statements. That's why you have publicists.
Mhm.
That's why we do those things. That will set your business up so much better to show people that you can communicate through challenges. You can effectively tell people what they can expect. And if you don't meet those expectations, how you'll, rectify that in the future. So long answer to your question is I think that people need to learn how to have a brand voice on social that is agnostic of your personal voice. So if you're going to have
Mm.
a brand presence, like for instance, if you yourself are the brand, then you need to understand your presence is no longer Ashley, but it's the brand that you're
Right.
presenting, which is
Yes.
tough. It's tough for me. I use my close friends a lot.
Have to protect yourself. And what's interesting about the Keith Lee example is like they didn't even say anything. I mean, he didn't get any food basically. Like, so he basically sat in his car and was like, I tried to get food, and then they found out I was here and they tried to seat me, and that's not how this goes, right? And so I believe you even said this in one of your TikToks. They could have created an opportunity for him to get food the
Yes.
way that agrees with his process, and they just decided to go all out of whack. So, anyway, while we're here, there are some popular branding, I don't want to say faux pas, but situations that exist right now that I want to run by you because I need to know how that brain of yours works when you hear these situations. The biggest one at the time of the recording, the Super Bowl has not happened yet. I'm sure when people watch this, they'll know who wins and if Taylor Swift made it there yet or not. We don't know that yet. But do you think that Taylor Swift did in some way, and this is not me sharing an opinion, this is not an opinion, but did she put Travis or the Chiefs on the map in some way, shape, or form? Because the NFL is like, thanks, Taylor, for showing up. You've helped us a lot. Even they acknowledged it.
Mm. So that is so interesting, right? Because it's like the script, right? Like, is this
The
all part of
NFL is
the
accused
script?
of writing a script,
Yes,
yes.
exactly. Accusing the NFL of having a script in the beginning of the season and everyone following
Mhm.
along with it. I think that Taylor Swift, the machine that is Taylor Swift, she has created $331 million of brand value for the NFL alone.
Facts.
That's eyeballs when it comes to viewership, which is huge. I mean, one of the major ways that leagues make their money is through media distribution deals. So that's more eyeballs on the TV screen. That's why they have the Taylor cam on the broadcast. That's more people talking about it on social media. That's more companies that are willing to have sponsorship activations because they know with Taylor comes visibility.
Right.
So it's undeniable. I mean, the facts are the facts. $331 million of brand valuation were brought. We cannot dispute that.
Sheesh.
I think when it comes to the dynamic of did she have any type of influence outside of that? I mean, the fact of the matter is the Kansas City Chiefs are a dynasty in and of themselves.
This is true.
And
As a fan, I will tell people up front, I'm going to the Super Bowl because I am a fan. So I'm going to support that statement.
I mean, and I'm a Bears fan, but I would have to say, I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are just a dynasty in and of themselves. And this is a perfect scenario for the NFL. Did they plan it? No. Are they happy that it happened? Oh, I'm absolutely sure. Um, Now, one thing I will say that I think is interesting, and I'm going to get her name wrong, Kristen, I think her last name is Jusic, with the NFL licensing rights for the jackets that she
Oh,
created.
yes, her husband plays for the 49ers, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
And she's been making rounds because she got approved for a licensing deal, which is very coveted with the NFL. And Taylor was a huge reason for that because she designed a
Mm,
jacket for Taylor. And so I think what we're actually witnessing is the power of an entity that's bigger than the NFL coming in and inserting that brand power and then just kind of coming up with this super thing, the super crossover, the
mm,
magic to how do you get women interested in men's sports and how do you get men's
right.
sports to translate through to a wider audience. So I don't think anybody planned it out, but
That would be too genius.
I'd be interested to know who actually introduced Kelsey with Taylor Swift.
The questions that we need answers. Who would have even thought I just without getting too far into it, who would have even
That's where
thought,
a real script might be, Emma.
honey? Because and people like discredit this, the rollout of that even. Like it's not like he said it on his podcast and like that was
No.
2 days after their first date. That's what it's supposed to look like, but like
Yeah.
even that is a
Yes,
strategy.
it's all a show. Taylor has one of the most genius publicists ever. I can't her name escapes me.
She's the woman with the
With the
orange
red
hair
hair.
that's always the
Yes,
red hair, sorry, yes, behind her
yes,
on all the red
yes,
carpets, yes.
yes. She is her and Yvette Noel Shore, who's Beyonce's publicist.
That's who we're getting to next, yes.
Yes, if you want to ask me who are my two like meccas, those two are genius.
Wow.
There's nothing that they do that is not calculated. So yeah, this Taylor thing has been a rollout. Just like she announced her her upcoming album that
Album.
she's working on for 2 years at the Grammys. So yeah, I stand. And if you want more insight on how I feel about the fan bases, I posted something on my TikTok some time ago about the inevitable that I think is going to happen, which are as soon as there's friction within Taylor and Travis, then the fan bases will act in the opposite. We're seeing how $331 million being injected looks like, but what happens when they break up? Because the Swifties are known to be a little vindictive. So
Do you think they would like hate watch his games or like
I don't think
show
they
up
would
to like
I don't think they'd hate watch. I don't even, you can't like, teenagers know how the worst ways to get back at things. Like there's
no,
probably
they're
some type
smart.
of like technology that I'm not even
Mhm.
aware of. You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily think it would be that, but I think that the pendulum swings both ways. So it'll be interesting to watch how, if it happens on the other, because the only other alternative would be she's his or he's her end game, according to the song.
Oh, not the Swift lyric. That's hilarious. I did not know that about you.
Very low key, more
That
so
is,
on the business side. I mean, her songs are not necessarily for me, but that's a businesswoman.
and that's the thing. It's the brand, and also some of the bops are undeniable. Sorry, however you feel about her, they're catchy. I'm sorry, I'm never gonna
I'm
deny
gonna
it.
rock teardrops on my guitar until I can't sing no more.
Ma'am, ma'am. I was, and did I play 22 every single moment the day I turned 22? Of course,
Yeah,
because you had to. It was
rite of
2000 and
passage.
whatever year that was, 15, 16. Anyway, okay, so the other huge brand I have to ask you about, which is essentially doing the opposite, is Beyonce, who really doesn't respond to much of anything. Most recently, her husband was on the Grammy stage, just kind of like revealing his stream of consciousness um,
He
just
gets
about the
nervous. He tells the truth.
Grammys, her not getting album of the year, which obviously I have a problem with as well. So it's like, is that strategy for someone of a certain stature? Because a lot of people wish that like Nicki Minaj would react that way to things. And like, do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, but do you have to be like really, really super duper famous to be able to pull that off?
Absolutely not. And I tell people all the time, I wish some celebrities would leave us alone. Like, please leave me alone. I don't need to know any more of your business. We don't need to know any of that. Save that
Yes.
for your close friends, for the
Mhm.
burner account. Like, please.
Correct.
I think that Beyonce is one of those entities where she transcends any type of typical approach.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when she speaks out, or if she were to speak out, the message would be lost in translation because the being is too big.
Right.
Like, she could come out and say, hey, I like purple pillows, and all anybody hears is, hey, I have an opinion about something, and there's something that I have a preferential,
Mm.
liking for, and I'm sharing that with you. And because it's not the same as you, that allows you to give negative, energy and
Right.
feedback back. So a lot of times it just doesn't make sense for herself to speak. That's why you have the brand machine that is her. That's why you have very carefully curated social media, very carefully curated content pieces that come out, long form content. We don't get a lot of short form with her because her ideas cannot be translated in short form. And I think that is what happens when you've reached a level of being too big for the message, no matter what that message is. And I
Mm.
think Nicki is not too big for the message, and she could be, but because she's not too big for the message, she has not positioned herself to, when she speaks, people listen to, not to comprehend, but to critique,
Mm.
because she's not often saying something that's worth comprehending.
Hmm.
And that's not in a shadeful way. I'm such a huge Nicki fan. I
Yeah.
think her imbalance comes in lack of effective messaging of what the purpose is at every given juncture. So, like, even with the Meg thing, right? Like,
Yep.
I've been a
Her and
barb.
Megan Thee Stallion dropping songs for beat.
Yes,
When Megan never mentioned her, I just want to factually point that out.
at all, right? And like, and
Right.
itty bitty piggy, I was a barb from forever. Um,
Iconic Nicki Minaj
iconic.
repertoire.
There's no denying
Yes.
what she's done. And I'm a huge Meg fan. And I think that both brands approach that in a very different way. But I
Mm.
think where Nicki went wrong is, whereas if Beyonce were to release a diss track, well, we know when she just bow down, right? That was basically her diss track to anybody
Was.
who it was for.
Everybody all in one. Yes.
Right? There was no like lead up to it. There was no tweeting barrage of mess. There was no other way to misinterpret what the purpose of that song was than like bow down.
Mm-hmm.
Nicki gave us every single thing in the kitchen sink and then the song. So there was no real clear way to decipher what her message was behind it, besides like a lot of chaotic words and messaging and energy around it. And so that's why I think it's a balance where, like, I don't think Nicki has reached the point where she can't say anything yet, because she still needs to be able to communicate clearly what her message is and what her brand is. We know Beyonce is Beyonce. Nicki Minaj on any given day is a mean girl in the industry right now, unfortunately, right? Like, the
And many
industry,
people have said that. Yeah.
and many people have said that, right? On any given day, she can be considered, I should say, a mean girl in the industry. She can be considered, someone who's tied to some very not great characters. And all that is listed before we start getting to one of the best female MCs in the game.
Right.
And that's what happens when you're out in the public eye too much. You have the opportunity to have those things overshadowed. So sometimes I wish Beyonce would give us more, because I do think that
Of course.
it has gotten to a little bit of an extreme where we just don't hear from her. And it does turn some fans off, but I think that she's able to do that because she's too big for the message. Like, what's she gonna come out and say, lollipop, lollipop, and then everybody's mad because she's doing sugar and not gluten-free anymore?
I've never heard it explained like that before, and it makes so much sense that she's like bigger than the message.
Mm-hmm.
That's some people need to remember that, like even in arguments, but that is
Oh my goodness,
specifically
right? Yes.
funny. Absolutely. So I do wonder from you why you think it's important, because I love that what you do on your social media is in real time. You're like, here's what's going on. Here's what I, as a PR crisis girly, would do, say, plan. Why is it important for us regular people to have that kind of understanding of what's going on? Because you even will break down interviews like Jonathan Majors, and I feel like it's important for people in a way to understand what's going on. So why do you think you need to explain that to people so that they get what they're watching and consuming?
Because the media controls the mind.
Like
And
Beyonce said,
like
yes.
Beyonce says, I mean, listen, I am of her generation. No, but
Same.
I really feel as though responsible media consumption is something that everybody should have access to. And especially in an environment where things can be so easily manipulated, or you just don't have access to the information or to how things really work. Um, it can create a sense of outrage or a state of panic or misinformation that can be detrimental, specifically to the community that I hold dear, which is the Black community.
Right.
I mean, we know that Black Twitter is a thing. We
Hmm.
know that a lot of the Black community drives these social media vehicles and the content that's popularized and pushed out. I mean, we use African American vernacular in everyday marketing.
Yes.
Um, and so I feel it's important for me to allow consumers to understand how these things work, and that media is all a function of how you can create a message and disseminate that message out. And
Mm.
there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And I think, specifically with the Jonathan Majors interview, where he was on GMA for, it was post the conviction, and he was discussing how he had been kicked off of Marvel and that whole situation. And I had just made the observation that I think it's a redemption tour because Disney owns GMA. Well, Disney owns ABC and
Right.
GMA is on ABC. And it's those types of important like pieces of information and putting the pieces together, because I think that that just helps you be a more informed consumer. It allows you to be able to really know what's happening and what you're consuming and what you're being told, and then being a little bit more critical. So then maybe your reaction when you hear like he's been released by Disney is not as extreme, because you're not thinking like it's the end of the world for him, right?
Right.
It's more so like he's on a redemption arc. And so yeah, I think that it's just really important to have responsible media consumption in a way that people are really knowing how the things that they're watching and consuming come together. And then also on the flip side, how they are being manipulated through marketing. And manipulated is not a bad word. It's not negative at all. I mean, you have to influence human behavior through ways of some type of manipulation.
Right. I do want to ask you, because you spoke about this earlier, that you just felt like you had reached a dream or a goal so early. And so I always like to end these with people giving advice. What advice would you give to someone who feels that way? They're like, I wanted to get to this company or this job title or move to this place, and they did it, and now they don't know what to do. What's your advice to someone who feels that way, who knows they're a disruptor? They just maybe don't know what their next step is.
Never let your fear hinder forward progress.
Sheesh.
And you're going to be scared a lot. There's going to be so many things that you're fearful of. Fear is not negative. It's not an indication always of something that's harmful to you. It might be an indication of something that's new. It might be an indication of something that's challenging, and it might be the one thing that's standing in between you and the next greatest thing. And so what I would say is that if you've gotten to a certain point, first off, if you have the audacity to dream, you have the audacity to continue dreaming. And you just have to take some time and listen to that inner voice and really feel what that scary thing is. And if you're afraid of it, that's likely the thing that you're supposed to do next.
Sheesh. Rachel Parrish. This was so fun. The time flew by. Like I
It
thought doing
really
30 minutes with people would like be like so hard, and this flew by. So thank you so much for coming here and educating the people, educating me. I appreciate you always.
Thank you for having me so much.